All right, looks like a good time to start. It's a little bit hard following John Patterson. I think he's got more knowledge in his little finger than I've got in my entire brain. So, nonetheless, it's also one of the last presentations of the day, so hopefully everybody had a good time getting some good knowledge on project controls and what people are doing, what people are thinking, and definitely take some ideas home, which is really what my presentation is about. So I think it is a good summary to hopefully finish things off with. Unlocking the power of project data analysis for megaprojects. Don't ask me where that title came from. Actually, somebody else came up with it, and that's actually a true story, and I'm going to stick with it. But nonetheless, dealing with data on our projects is probably one of the biggest problems that we have in our profession of project controls. In this presentation, I'm going to go talk about my journey through project controls, some of the strategic points that I think we can use and examples. I want to talk about some complexities in our data. It's something that in a lot of these presentations I've seen, I don't think anybody really dives into some of the complexities that we deal with. And to finish it off, I want to go talk about maybe what I see as a vision for the future. I'm sure everybody's got their own. You can take it with a grain of salt. One of the key messages that I want everybody to take away from this presentation is that when we talk about data, we all have our past experiences, and we've all dealt with data in our own way, and that shapes the way that we look at our current projects, and it's going to shape the way that we're going to look at our future projects. For me, I've been doing this since 1994. Just to put that in perspective, that's 25 years, and John Patterson's got 50 years, so obviously a lot of disclaimers there. But my first job was to track the concrete, grout, and earthworks progress for that facility right there. It's a nice screenshot off of Google Maps. And I was doing this as just a summer intern. Project controls manager said, go do something. So he handed me a one-line item that the home office had given us that said, it was like concrete progress or concrete 100,000 man hours. And we had to say, well, go progress it. Sat with the lead engineer. He's like, oh yeah, you go into the drawings and you just measure all the quantities of every pour that you're going to do, and here's a little table that you can just multiply what type of pour it is by some man hours, and then put that as your item in your database. Databases in 1994, yeah, we did. I think it was a Fox Pro database, I think. And we had a nice little front end built in COBOL, and I could go and add all my line items, and I worked in a tent right in that picture somewhere, and every day walked out, saw what they poured, 50% if they haven't done it, so some metrics, 100% when it's all done, and we got a nice little percent complete done. This is pretty simple stuff. And you think about, we still struggle with doing this today. It's a bit odd. Not that what I did then was perfect. I think we screwed up, because when I finished all my takeoffs, I think I ended up with 30,000 man hours, and I just balanced and left a 70,000 man hour balance in the report that had a 0% progress against it. So I have no idea what happened to that one. A couple of years later, I did a telecom project where we were building out some fiber through a bunch of cities in the United States. We had roughly 15 cities. Each city had maybe 10, 15 buildings that we were connecting fiber into, and then fiber connections through all the downtown streets. So we basically ripped up every street in the United States, which was great fun because everybody hated us. But we had to measure progress. Actually, this one was, we had to measure a cost for progress, because all our contracts were unit rates for linear meters of fiber, number of conduits installed. So every month we had to know, well, how much money did we spend this month? Each one of our project sites had a slightly different Excel file that was calculating what their costs were for the month. like, well, we can maybe do this better. There's something called Microsoft Access, and so I built a nice little Access database, and it totally failed. To roll it out to 15 different cities, they were each having their own processes, and every one of their little processes did not map into this file. They were driving all their reports. So in Excel, they had all their less curves and their actual accrual reports, and they couldn't quite get it out of our nice structured Access database. So tried something and we failed, and that's part of our business. It happens. Fast forward a couple of years. In 2006, that's when I came to Australia. I'm from Perth. I was doing RGP4, which is it was a mega project for BHP to go build more tons. And I was engaged to be the lead planner on the project. And the level of complexity of all our data was something that I don't think anybody realized at the time. We had all our engineering deliverables, we had our schedule, we had costs everywhere, mapping to cash flow forecasts. And I'm like, well, I know a couple things about web pages, and I want to go take some of this data and I want to put it onto a web page. And everybody's like, well, why are you going to do that? And I'm like, well, let me do a demo for you guys. And I couldn't even do a demo until they gave me access to the web server, but they did, and it was totally awesome. And so we had a web page where you could go click on weekly reports, and I just put in all the PDFs of the weekly reports, and you could see them all on a web page. It was very simple. A simple implementation of technology. We weren't really dealing with any databases for that, but we also loaded all the schedule progress. We also loaded all the engineering deliverables. We actually had actuals from our SAP timesheet system. And so on the lower right, this is actually an example page we had for our control systems engineering. And so the lead engineer for the control systems could just go to this web page and he could see exactly how many man hours per deliverable he had spent. And it was updated every week when they finished their timesheet systems. I had to do a little copy and paste from the SAP download. I had to do a copy and paste out of the engineering database. I had to do a copy and paste out of our P3 at the time. But you put them all in an Access database, link them all together, and drive a web page. And you get insane amounts of easy data visual. This sort of frames my point of view and how I approach things. It was me sitting in a desk trying to do something for my specific function with the people that I deal with. It was never trying to do something for you to help you do your job or you do your job. And that's sort of the journey that we face now. Because when we deal with data now, it's much more project-wide, integrated into a project management framework. For strategic points, I kind of want to go into some Power BI. This is more fast-forwarding into the now of what we're dealing with now. And I'm going to talk about Power BI. And with that, you can immediately do things. And you can put into your presentations and strategy guides a lot of really cool stuff. But are you doing it in a smart way that is actually able to implement it and make sense? I got a couple items on here. And I've seen diagrams like this everywhere, where someone just has their little icon of the system, and they've got little arrows connecting everything. And oh yeah, we've got P6, we've got ecosystems with our costs, we've got SAP with our actuals, everything's going into a nice SQL Server database, and everything's coming out into a Power BI dashboard. Oh, we love this stuff. But this is what we're doing. Because the raw source of truth data is actually an ugly quantity progress report that looks like that. That's the little one on top. The one in the background is actually a cash flow forecast where we've got every one of our contracts in our job, and our cost team edits that on a shared Excel file with spreading the cash flow per month for the forecast, how much we're going to spend in the future. This is the reality that we're dealing with, and it's much more complex than that. So you got to find the balance of what's going to work and know what's not going to work. This is a slide I struggled with a lot, because the concept of enter data once, we're talking about strategies here. So when you're looking at what you do, everybody wants to enter data once. But I'm not sure if we really think about what that actually means. You go back to that little arrow diagram where you think you enter data once and that data is going to flow everywhere. I'm not sure if I agree with that approach. I think there's other meanings of the term. That's true. Get systems talking, great. But there's maybe some other ways. We have I worked on a bridge project, and I was in Korea in a home office, and the bridge was in the UK. I was the lead planner for the company trying to get information of what's going on. The client of the bridge actually had a Twitter site where every couple days, they'd actually post pictures on their Twitter feed that was embedded into the client's website of what happened. And I remember when they posted this image, and so this was the final segment connecting the bridge. And I could probably read the date. I think it was like 31st of July, 2017. That is just immediate. It's in your face. This is somebody entering data, Twitter feed on their phone, taking a picture, and that bit of data goes everywhere. Everybody can see it immediately. This is what I think when I talk about enter data once. On the right, this is another example of a weekly report. Oh, we love reports. We've got a bunch of contractors on site. We've got some project engineers every week in our office. The project engineers need to write up some narrative of what happened last week, what's looking out into the next week in the future, what are the areas of concern or risk. It's pretty structured commentary when you look at weekly reports that we do in an EPC space. And I thought, well, I can just put this into a SharePoint list. I can have a line for every one of the contracts. I can put a little form, so each area contract manager can click on that form or click on their line and go to edit. And they can go key in the commentary. And this is information that you're only keying in once. This is not an email that you're sending off to your main person that's doing your weekly report or monthly report file. It's not you're not emailing the file back and forth. You're actually not even opening. Maybe you have the native Word file sitting on a SharePoint site and it's in a shared environment and everybody's opening it and editing it. Yeah, that works sometimes too. But here you're actually entering it into a database. And when you do that, you enter it in. Nice thing about SharePoint lists is there's columns off on the right that says exactly who edited the data and when. And that is totally cool as far as I'm concerned. So when we talk about enter data once, these are some of the concepts that I think we should be looking at. We should also look at integrating systems as well, but there's other project data that we deal with. Other project data is that cash flow file. So if I go back a couple pages, that little ugly Excel file, I'm like, well, is there a smarter way of doing this? By the way, this didn't work, but I at least thought about it. Well, I'm using these SharePoint lists and I got people editing information. Can I just put every one of the contracts as a line item in a SharePoint list and have every cost engineer who manages their items, or even the contract manager or the area manager responsible for that package, they can go to the SharePoint list and they can also edit their information as well. And when you do that, you can directly link to a dashboard and you can see an overall cash flow. This is some of the data integration you can get with dashboards if you have data structured in a certain way. Going on these lines of strategy, we want to be visual. This is a very good topic. We love dashboards. Dashboards are the future. I think as far as I know, every project that I know is building dashboards of some sort or another. Every vendor that we've seen present today is building out dashboard suites and their tools. You need to be visual with your data in some manner or form. This is some examples that I've actually built. The lower right one is very interesting because that actually is the visual for the contract commentary. So in that little top right sequence where our area engineers are actually keying in the commentary for the contracts, the actual visual that we display, or visual that we could display, could be on the lower right. I'm asking the person to put in a checkbox. Is this red, amber, green? Is this something we should pay attention to? I don't need to read every commentary that everybody writes. If they tell me it's important, tag it as red. It's going to come up on my visual as red. I can take my little mouse, I can hover over it, and I can see the commentary that way. So there's very smart ways you can go about being visual with your data. The one on the top is schedule. I'm really a scheduler at heart, even though I've spent a lot of times in cost. Schedules are awesome. Progressor is awesome. Looking at forecasts, just awesome stuff. But too often, you get into meetings with your project engineers, your project management, and they're not looking at your schedule. So we have entire schedule teams that put a lot of effort in making sure we've got good schedules, and then no one really looks at it. Or when they do look at it, perhaps they're not extracting the meaning that we've actually put into it, such as variances. If you said something's going to happen last month, well, that's going to be in last month's schedule. You're going to have a new date in this month's schedule. There's going to be a variance in there. That's pretty important. If you put a variance column up on a dashboard, allow somebody to quickly filter through some filters on a dashboard as opposed to thumbing through a 100-page PDF of your P6 file, there's a lot of information in there that you can quickly distill in a visual. You can have some KPIs of how many activities have I finished for the area I've filtered on, of the remaining activities to go, how many are critical. In this dashboard, you can just click the red, and all the activities in the bottom are automatically filtered to, these are your critical activities. So be visual. That's the future, if not the present. We can also go into resource analysis. So again, when we look at schedules, very little discussion is ever made in any management discussions of, we have this forecast date, but what are all the resources required to actually achieve that? And, well, we don't really have any good visuals that allow that. We do our S-curves, we do our 3-part curves where we have some histograms and some man-hour forecasts, and we divide by 45 hours a week and we can get a manning. We do a lot of that stuff, but it's not easily filtered, it's not easily distilled. If you want to go into one specific area, one specific contract, you might have to do 100 custom S-curves, whereas if you put the data into a smart dashboard, you can click, 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 and you can get infinite number of curves. One thing in this is that this is easy. This dashboard is coming off of one file that's a copy and paste out of Primavera. I've not linked into Primavera database directly. You actually, as far as I know, you actually can't get the resource histogram directly out of Primavera. You would have to do a copy and paste. But nonetheless, this is just one flat Excel file that I can import into Power BI and generate this for any contract anywhere in the world as long as it has some structure. Your data is complex. There's easy things that I've done, and I'm not a full data expert. A lot of times we're going to have digital teams with a lot of data experts that are going to go start building data models for us. And this is what we do. Even simple people can do this, but data guys do it to the nth degree. This is smart. There's nothing wrong with it, but you have to be careful of what I'm going to call billions and billions of stars, because I'm not sure that when we do something, we don't grasp how many data points actually exist. When you hand it off to a digital team, they could, in theory, create a resource table that's going to have 1 billion rows in it. If you have, let's say 5,000 resource assignments in a schedule, you've got a 2-year project, you update that once a week. You have plan, you have your forecast, you have your actuals on every one of those data dates. You also have subcontractors. This is maybe a level 3 home office schedule, but now you're also going to have maybe 10 subcontractors in the field. They're going to be giving you the same information. You add that all up, and actually I have a little calculation where it does get into 1 billion rows of data. And maybe that's not the best way to do it. It works if you've got 1, 2, 3. It works maybe if you've got 100 schedules. The databases work really good if you've got 1 million to 10 million rows. You can do a lot of smart filtering because there's going to be a lot of zeros. There's going to be a lot of numbers that don't change. There's smart ways you can do that in your database, and the data guys will actually do that behind the scenes without telling you to solve a problem that they haven't told you that they have. So when we talk about data for mega projects specifically, you really have to understand everything that's going in there. Look over the shoulder of your data guys if you have them, know exactly what they're doing with your data, and ask them what problems that they're having with what we provide them. On a lot of the examples that I do, I just do a flat table export. I know the information that I want. I can build my visual. If there's something on my visual that I want to add, I can just go back to this flat file and add it. If you have a rigid data structure that you've actually designed the schema around and you realize that there's something you want to add, there's some difficulties behind. So we're sort of talking about some strategic approaches. Sometimes start dumb before you start building your Facebook application. This is not the formal application way to do something, but it is a way for you to understand the data and what needs to go into your platform, and it leads to the discussion that you're going to have with, hopefully, your digital team on what they're going to do with your data. A couple little notes. I sort of wrote these slides like I was just going to read them off the slide. There's really no notes that I've got for these. When I brought up the issue of your billions of data points, a lot of that is caused because of historical data. You're every week getting new data. And do you need to include all that data? I can go back to that P6 dashboard. I had 3 little date columns. I had current forecast date, I had prior month forecast date, I had baseline date, and you could actually see all 3 together. If you have a really nice model, all that information will actually exist in not 3 separate tables, but it'll exist in 3 separate rows that are actually populated on 3 separate ingestions from separate files. You can just build an import file, a flat file like this, that actually has your baseline date, your prior forecast date, and your current forecast date. So there's smart ways to go about it. Understand your cadence. We want real-time data, but before we can actually get there, do we understand when our schedules are updated? I was on a project where we had contractor schedules coming in weekly, and we had an owner's EPCM schedule that was only updated monthly. So there was always this disconnect of data of, well, what data points align to what. So understand the differences in data dates between various sources of information. And if you can't get real-time information, understand that limitation. And don't build something that's going to get real-time information because it won't fit with another data source. No data structure is better than a bad data schema. This just goes to, as I mentioned, smart ways of building out your platform that is going to feed your dashboards in your digital world. Everything that we do on dashboards in Power BI in our digital space is written in code. So here's just an example of two nice gauge charts. It's actually very easy to do this in an Excel file. You can actually generate something very similar in Excel. But if you actually do it in Power BI, it's not as intuitive as you might expect. One of the complications is just understanding what the data date is. Because if you have some historical data loaded into your database and you say, well, show me the percent complete, it's just going to bomb. It doesn't even know what to filter on. You might have a toggle on your dashboard that says what your current report period is, but what if you don't? You want your system just to be smart enough to know what the data date is. Well, you can actually write code to do that, and that actually is like a little example of, and I actually copied that from somebody else. I rewrote it a little bit, but that does tell me what at least tells me what the actual is as of the current data date. A simple donut chart. So this was on the schedule visual. I have these little numbers, 6 divided by 78. Well, we all read that. We can see, oh yeah, it's 6 out of 78. But your database and your platform does not know that. You actually have to explicitly write code that's going to go get the number 6 from some query that you have to write. You then have to add a little slash in there to actually build a text string, and then you need the next variable of 78, and that's going to be another query from a database. So even something very simple can actually become very hard. The end game? Well, We've got our nice dashboards, we've got some good digital strategy, we've got some ideas of what we're doing with our data. But does any of that really matter? So this is where it gets a little fuzzy into project management, because everything that we're trying to do in this space is try to alter our processes, alter the ways that we work on projects, alter the management structure of even how we work. The key word in all management discussions these days is agile. And I've actually worked within an agile environment for some software development, and it doesn't translate to our construction world. But some of the terminology is important. The concepts are important. Even the software tools that are built to manage a Jira world, Jira is the software I was going to mention, but to manage Agile, the software packages that are built, including Microsoft DevOps. There's this very complex term, DevOps, and it is one of the most cool bits of software in the world that actually lets you manage your tasks. It doesn't have to be, you're not developing any software. You can actually have a task in there for pour concrete, and then you can track that over, have you not started it? Have you started it? Have you finished it? You can have your commentary and discussions in there, and that fits within Agile world. There's a lot of terminology. So you'll hear Agile people talk about epics, backlog, burn down charts, user stories, Kanbans, product owners, sprints, sprint planning, retrospective. We actually do all this already. We just maybe have some different terms for it. Epics, those are some high-level areas in our WBS. Your backlog, well, that's your full scope of work. We actually know what we're building. Most of the time. This is assuming we got a project in execution or just going into execution. Burn down charts. We do progress curves. We've been doing progress curves our whole lives. It's actually a new thing in the software business, so they're actually loving these concepts of burn down charts, but we do them all the time. User stories. User story is actually even your full WBS or even a lower level of your WBS. You'd actually have some tasks underneath that. Kanban. That's just a visual representation of all your tasks. It's akin to someone putting Post-it notes up on a wall of what do you need to do this week. Sometimes those are, well, I need to write a scope of work, or other times is I need to actually write or approve an invoice, or I need to get a site instruction approved through our approvals process. And so there's other aspects involved in the work. Product owners, well, we have organization structures. That's all it is. Sprints, we do wonderful feasibility studies, and a sprint effectively is a feasibility study. And at the end of a job, we do retrospectives, and we sit and discuss all lessons learned from projects. This is actually an example of Jira. This is an example of, I wish I could read it, and I can't. This is meant to be an example of a substation being manufactured off-site, a substation that has to be factory accepted, some concrete that needs to be poured, and the delivery of the substation to site. It's a very nice, simple chain of activities, and we had to actually have all those activities in our Primavera schedule, but they're not visual. It's not embedded into the work process. So the area manager that's actually trying to arrange when is the substation going to be delivered, he's got his own files, his own work processes that he's going to use. You could actually turn on a tool such as Jira, and everybody can enter data once, and you have an integrated world where everybody's looking at the same set of information, the same commentary on a task. If you have concrete that's late, you can actually go out on the site, take a picture of the concrete, add it to your task, and say, status of concrete, expected finish 25th of December. Of course, you're not going to finish on 25th of December, but somebody could write that if they wanted to. This leads to immediate data integration. It leads to engagement with the team working together, and it's a visual representation of your data. So I think at least thinking about this will help us. The nirvana of real-time information. I love this picture because I actually worked on that project. And it was just a simple webcam. That webcam was available 24/7. It took pictures every 5 minutes, posted it onto a website. You could actually do a timeliner. You could scroll the bar back and forth, and you can see the progress up to 5 minutes, effectively now, real time. That's not quite real-time data, but it's still real-time information, and that's maybe a starting point that you can use. We also have Aconex, document control systems. There is an immense amount of real-time information that we put into our communications, into our documents that go through. You might not use Aconex, but every project I've done has actually used it in one form or another, so hopefully you guys know what it is. Querying Aconex and pulling in information into a visual gets you real-time information, at least to start. A bit of the end game. What do we want to do? We do want to change the way that we work. Well, why? Why do we even want to change the way we work? Well, we want to be hyper-reactive so that when the concrete is late, we want to know as early as possible what the status is so that we can smartly arrange the delivery of the substation. If we have to go to the vendor and say, you need to store this thing, we need to get out in front of that immediately and smartly understand how are we going to store it, smartly react to how are we going to change our delivery of the substation to site. How are we going to, in a smart way, let our installation contractor know when they are going to get the substation on site. Those are all the issues that you get when you have live information of what's going on today and you get people engaging in a cooperative discussion of what's going on. They might not agree when things are going to happen, but at least you're going to engage the discussion. Conclusion? I've got a little talking point up here on the computer that says decisions matter. That's really what we're looking at, are decisions. People are making decisions every day, and maybe you're not fully cognizant of them, but maybe when we do transition to a more digital world where information and communication is more visible, the actual decisions that we make relative to that data can have a much bigger impact to our projects. That's it. Enjoy your afternoon, and thanks. And if there's any questions, you guys can ask away. Go for it.
The platform for doing your dashboards. Platform for doing your dashboards. It would seem that Excel is quite a good platform to do that on.
Excel is a very good platform.
And so is that the general way that you go, or are there specialist software that is preferred?
The presentation does mention SharePoint lists. So you can, if you have a good structure of what you're doing in Excel, maybe think about using a SharePoint list, because then what you get out of it, even though we're never going to get out of using stuff in Excel, it's there. But some things that we do in Excel, we can move across to maybe a smarter environment. So that's really just the answer.
Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. I was wondering, in terms of real-time data, I guess visualization and seeing the status of what's going on, I guess in a real-time manner, how would you approach, let's say, design documents where the status fluctuates, the quality fluctuates? How would you approach managing that? Because previously you would have let's say phase control or some sort of gated methods of controlling
I'm
that.
sure we've all seen it. So you have some drawing, you're going to have some Rev A, Rev B, Rev C.
Yeah.
Hopefully you're going to get some Rev 0 or some other increment.
Yeah,
Maybe you're going to have a Rev 1 or a Rev 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've actually never seen a project that doesn't do that.
Yeah.
But the smart way is that, well, if those documents are being loaded into Aconex, then you can directly query and see the status in Aconex. And then you can actually have that status go into an engineering progress report, as opposed to actually asking the engineer what's the status. It's like I don't need to ask you. I can just query Aconex and find the status. And so that sort of gives you that visibility into a very low level of detail.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for your presentation. That was really cool. I'm big on
Thanks.
data-driven decisions too. But can you talk us through some challenges you've had with Power BI and time-distributed data, in particular?
Yeah, dealing with data sucks. If my presentation didn't have the couple slides, I added those slides on how do we deal with data because of issues such as that. Just drawing an S-curve in Power BI is not
Impossible.
easy. So how do I deal with it? You figure it out.
If I do, I'll let you know. If you do, let me know.
I can. You can read some of my blogs. I have some blog posts that actually do talk about that specific issue, and you can find all my information on LinkedIn You can just search me up and find a bunch of rants of everything.
Yeah, cool.
You don't need to ask any more questions. It's okay. There's no pressure. Thanks, guys.